Okay, welcome to this podcast. Today we're going to be talking about virtual lessons using Microsoft Teams, and we've got Darren on the call as well. So, Darren, you're a teacher, you can't make it into school, or you're a student, you can't make it in school. Maybe you've got students in different locations. How do we start off creating that virtual lesson inside Microsoft Teams?
Well, I guess the general idea is you can try and replicate some of the things you would do in a real classroom and extend that using Teams remotely. Obviously, it's not the same. You haven't got that same kind of eye contact as you would face to face. There's no body language really, apart from what you can see on the screen. But I think you can still do a lot to hand over the learning and to create that learning within the students. So the idea with the virtual lesson, I would do it as I would teach a normal lesson, starting off with your kind of presentation phase. So the teacher here could broadcast the presentation phase of the lesson over video. So everybody dials in to a video that's been set up. You've got the teacher as the person who's mainly talking initially, and the students pens down and listening. You can mute. If you mute the first 5 students, the rest of the students will automatically get muted as they join the meeting as well. So the teacher then hands over. He might have a PowerPoint presentation. He might have some information that he's got in a OneNote or a Word document, or he wants to show something on the internet, or he's, if it's something practical, he might physically have that thing and just turn his machine around and start presenting something. So if it's a D&T thing, you're doing design and make, you could actually turn it around and physically show what the students are going to be doing. If it's an art lesson, you could do that. Obviously, if it's something more kind of language focused, like English or history, then there'd be a bit more chat, and you probably would have a bit of a PowerPoint in there. So you're going to present that to the students. They can see it. The other thing about that is that you record that presentation at the end of it. So if a student isn't able to get to the actual lesson at the scheduled time, they can always go back and they can watch that video later, and it's actually quite a good revision material.
So
anyway,
I guess those will just appear in the general channel, won't they? You can scroll up and you'll be able to see all the previous lessons that were broadcast and recorded.
That's it. Yeah. And then once that's been handed over and the students have had that presentation phase, what you then do, of course, is you get the students starting to do work as you would in a normal classroom. Normally they could do it on paper or, so in this case, there are a few tools they could use. They could use OneNote, so the students could make their notes in OneNote. If the requirement for them is to write a small burst of text or perhaps gather a couple of pictures, they could do that in OneNote within that class, or they could do it over in Sway and then bring the link in from Sway and paste that back in so that the teachers can get to it.
I guess the good thing about using the class notebook is the teacher can see everybody's private area, so they can just keep an eye on what's happening in the class as it happens.
That's right. It's that thing that you do in a real classroom where you walk around behind the students and you have a look over their shoulders and go, okay, yeah, that's great, that's on track, or oh, I think you've gone a bit off target on this one, you're not answering the question exactly that we've asked, or you're just not doing the work at all, why aren't you doing the work? And the teacher could kind of do that virtually by looking in the student sections of those pages.
And what if a student had a question, maybe they were stuck or they didn't understand something in your original presentation?
Yeah, well, they can just virtually put their hand up by messaging you. So they can either message you as a teacher individually without the rest of the class seeing if they've got a particular question that's just about them, or they can ask the question more generally to the whole class. Obviously, the teacher can chip in and answer that, but you might also find that the other students answer the question and they work together as peers. So, somebody might paste a question and say, is anybody stuck on question 7? Does anybody have the answer to this? Or what method are you using to work out the results for this? So it's actually a really good opportunity to do some collaboration within the class.
And what about, so that's great for the individual work in using OneNote and Sway. What about if the teacher wants them to work in groups and do some project work?
So you could do that as well, quite easily using channels. So there's two kinds of channel. There's just public channels that anybody can see, and then there are private channels. So what you could do is get a group of students together, call them Group 1, Group A, Group B, Group Yellow, Group Salmon, whatever, um, and only those students get added into that channel. So only they can see that piece of work, and they don't have to worry about students in other groups copying from them at that point. Or you could just leave it open and just spin up those channels, maybe one channel per topic that you're working on, and then everybody can dip in there and they can all kind of work collaboratively on those spaces. And then what you do at the end of that, obviously, you create some kind of product, some kind of output, like a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation or a Sway, and then you can take that back and give that to each student for them to have their own copy of it as well, that you can put inside the student folders inside the team if you have those.
So I guess to sort of finish up the lesson, and I guess if they're doing project work, you might want to present that project work to the rest of the class. How would they go about doing that, either as a teacher or I guess in their actual groups themselves?
So I guess as a teacher, I'm going to keep coming back to the class. That's kind of how it works. You throw a presentation out, set up the task, the students go off and do it, and then you bring them back after a bit. So maybe after kind of 20 minutes, you start up another call just to make sure that everybody's on track and to answer off any questions. And then you close that one down and they do a bit more. And then towards the end, you then bring all that together. So maybe you were doing some kind of jigsaw activity where different groups were they're each bringing something different to the party. And you pull that together literally because you share your screen, and then you can go into each of those documents and show them. So you can go into what Group Yellow have done and actually present that to the whole class. Or you could have it up on the screen and you're sharing it, but the students who are in Group Yellow can actually talk about the work that they've done and talk the rest of the class through it. So again, it's a really nice bit of show and tell. I don't think you're really losing that much compared to a real classroom, other than kind of, the physicality of it, and perhaps you are going to lose some of the body language, but there is so much of that normal lesson that you can deliver purely remotely.
And what's I guess what's the main barriers to using this? What are typical issues people might come up against when they try and do a virtual lesson in Microsoft Teams?
So I think you've got to make sure that everybody's got devices which are connected to the internet so that you can access that. Students, if they're at home, many of those are going to have mobile phones. That'll work. Obviously, you can't see too much detail on a mobile phone screen. A tablet will be better. But you can certainly participate and watch the video and listen to what's happening. And you can look at all those conversations that are happening as well. So I think you need to think about the devices. In terms of the teacher himself, I think training is an important thing. If this is going to happen and catch you unawares, and you're suddenly going to be asked to do a presentation, to do one of these virtual lessons, and you've never shared a video before in Teams, you're going to struggle because this is the first time you've done it and it's for real. So I guess I would recommend, even if you're not currently in a situation where you have to do this, I would give it a go anyway.
So just do it in a normal classroom, share it with the students, do some collaborative work in Teams, even if you're not remote, even if you're all in the same room.
That's right, because what you then do is you're scaffolding that for the students. You're training them what to do in the event of this kind of situation. And then when it happens for real, everybody's ready.
Great. Well, I think that's a good overview. Obviously, there's lots of detail in there, and we've got videos specializing in those different aspects, class notebook, conversations, etc. But thanks, Darren. I think that's a really good overview, and I'm sure it'll be useful to people.